We report these stories. 35% of the Democratic Party don't feel optimistic. My friend Peter Henry and Puck, how low esteem the Democratic Party is held in. I don't doubt any of that's true. But there's one thing. We're winning elections left and right. As we're talking about how the Democratic number image is low, it's in the toilet, or whatever you want to say, I don't dispute that. We just won an election in Omaha and beat a 12-year incumbent.
Democratic polling numbers are still, as James Carville likes to say, in the toilet. But instead of focusing on that, he wants to ignore it and focus on Dems winning elections. Carville went on to talk about some of the wins the Democrats have achieved in districts that were originally Trump territory, including Iowa and Wisconsin. But Cenk, what should the Democrats focus on right now? These wins or connecting more and rebuilding trust with their base?
So here's elections we didn't win. 2016 presidential election, 2024 presidential election. And we lost it to a guy with a sub 70 IQ, making it even more embarrassing. And a guy who tried to destroy democracy and said we should terminate the Constitution. But James Carville thinks we're winning apparently and don't need to change anything. Guys, what you're gonna see in this story is exactly what I said would happen, which is a whole bunch of establishment Democrats who will love corporate donor money now pretending that they're the new answer. No, they're the old answer, and that's the answer that is lost over and over again. So go ahead, Jordan, tell them about it.
Yeah, and as he was saying, polling is really bad for Democrats right now. The Associated Press and NORC Center for Public Affairs Research survey found that 35% of surveyed Democrats are very or somewhat optimistic about the future of their party, while another 36% are very or somewhat pessimistic about its future. Some 29% are neither pessimistic nor optimistic. Only 17% of those surveyed said they're optimistic about the future of the Democratic Party. The New York Times dug a little deeper into how Democratic voters are feeling during their latest opinion focus group, where they spoke to 11 Democratic voters about what worries them the most and what Democrats need to fix. The overarching feelings were demoralization and frustration. Demoralization over the varied effects of the Trump administration, from the science funding cuts to the sense that America isn't welcoming to others. Frustration with institutions not working harder to stand up to President Trump. Quote, I feel like the Democratic Party and the leadership act too much like gentlemen, trying to do and say the right thing. And they just need to take their gloves off and make decisions and come to conclusions, do something. That was Laura, one of the focus group participants. And when asked what respondents think of when they say the words Democratic Party, here's how they responded. Disappointing a little bit. Ariel took the words out of my mouth. Disappointing. Useless, I'm sorry. Inept. None of those, of course, are glowing. The New York Times has more. Democrats need to fight more. They're so status quo is the problem. They are so entrenched in corporate interest. You have Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer going on their book tours during the first few months of the collapse of democracy in our faces. Spencer, one of the participants, went on to make a really good point, which goes a little to what Carville was saying regarding looking at these victories instead of the overarching picture. It's shocking and just so disappointing and clear that they're out of touch at this larger level. At a local level, you see a lot of people in smaller government who are Democrats, who are doing much better work, who are uniting their communities, who are fighting to strengthen their communities and bring people together. I mean, Cenk, are you surprised by any of these focus group responses?
No, not at all. So look, the main things, guys, is to move on to a better strategy. And what the establishment of the Democratic Party is going to do is try to drag you back into the old strategy. Don't let them do that, okay? So we're going to get to this portion in a second because some of the usual suspects are back and they want to run for president and they want to tell you that they're different than they were before. Don't believe the hype. We'll get to that in a second. But a second part of this story is something that I'm going to take it in a different direction. Fear versus hope. Right now, the Democratic voters, unfortunately, are filled with so much fear. Very understandably, Trump's doing crazy things. ignoring courts, ignoring the Constitution, snatching people up off the streets, whether they're immigrants or they criticized Israel or whatever it might be. And so these are scary times, and they're bullying and intimidating people into silence. I understand there's a lot of reasons to be fearful, but if you give in to fear, they're gonna win. Like, so you're accidentally helping Trump if you get afraid. So I need Democratic voters to be bold and strong, okay? And to believe, not in the Democratic Party leadership, they let you down, but to believe in Democratic principles and those policies, and to have hope that yes, together we can pick better leadership and get the Democratic Party back to what it was, FDR, JFK, at least half of LBJ, right? So there was great Democrats in this country. We know what their policies were. By the way, their policies are, yes, very similar to Bernie Sanders' policies. Economic populism. You go back to the old Democratic Party, and you know what? Back then, they almost never lost. You know why? Because they actually delivered for people. But you've got to get away from the corporate establishment guys who tell you to do nothing and then usually surrender to Trump.
Because you know what the worst possible thing is to feel like you are being talked down to by someone who says, I know what's better for you and I'm gonna do it, and then they never really do anything, right? There's nothing worse than feeling like someone is kind of thumbing their nose down toward you and kind of playing you like a fool, right? And that, for better or worse, well, certainly worse, is how many voters feel about the Democratic Party, including registered Democrats like myself. And I remain a registered Democrat to this day. Now, let's look at the pragmatics of this, right? Big tent party, very complex country. Different candidates are gonna have somewhat different platforms, right? Based on where they are and their local constituencies. But that said, here I think is the issue. There's an absence of coherence in what the Democratic Party stands for at this point. I'm waiting to hear what their unified vision is that every single Democrat or those allied with the Democrats and trying to kind of restore humanity or basically give as much humanity to the Democrats as possible, like Senator Sanders, can agree on. So I think there should be a number of issues that every single Democrat should be voicing again and again and again, and there needs to be consistency in their messaging, no matter who or where they are. And there, of course, can be differences like any sort of complex grouping, any big tent party. And that big thread absolutely should be economic populist issues. And they should show that they are believable and would actually implement some of these things. Because part of what is really frustrating for all of us, and you've been talking about this forever, I've been talking about it with you guys, is people like our former president, Mr. Biden, saying, I'm gonna do all these things, and they don't even come close to sniffing doing almost any of those things. And then when we are upset about that, he says, oh, no, it's plenty good enough. It's good enough for you anyway. And that is absolutely a humiliating way to feel. And I think that's why many people feel disrespected by the Democrats, despite their policies. If they just go with what they may agree upon, maybe 70% of the American population have a clear, concise, coherent platform, it could help.
Yeah, obviously, 100%. Before we get to the bad guys coming back, real quick, I want Ramesh to say, look, that's why coherent policies that are very popular, well, that's what the populist plank is. That's why we created it here at TYT. Go to populistplank.com. So you'll see 6 super popular policies. They're all Democratic policies, but independents agree overwhelmingly. They all poll over 2/3, okay? In fact, a lot of Republicans agree. Anti-war, anti-corruption, paid family leave, all these paid family leaves at 84%. They have really popular bills. They're just choosing not to do them. And to Ramesh's point, then when we say, President Biden, why not do paid family leave at 84%? It should be easy to pass. Or it puts the Republicans in a very difficult position where they have to argue against American moms. He's like, nope, not gonna do it, not gonna, oh, you guys, you progressives are asking too much. You just trust Biden, just bow your heads. Because Biden is so smart, he's so strategic, it's easy, he's gonna win against Trump easy in 2024. And how'd that work out? We were right, they were wrong. Okay, get past that. We do Operation Hope here. Why? Because hope is important. You've got to actually get you up off your seat and get you fighting back effectively. So look, choose any pack you like for how to fight back, or non-packs, volunteer with whatever you got. But what I'm doing is rebellionpack.com. And and it's got Ro Khanna in it, it's got Ojeda, somebody else is gonna come out next week. These are real populist candidates. And what are they doing? Are they just cowering in a corner going, oh, no, they're coming out and saying, why don't we take Congress back?
Yeah, well, let's get into some of these usual suspects. And I think we can recognize the Dems are out of touch, especially when you consider who's being propped up as the saviors for the Democratic Party in 2028. First up, TYT favorite, friend of the network, former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Take a look.
The American dream is unaffordable. The American dream is inaccessible. And that should be unacceptable to all of us.
That's on the Democrats.
Yes. Now look, we're good. Our kids are good. Yeah. The question is, everybody in this audience, they just want one thing, their kids to have a shot. And the problem is Washington's giving them the shaft. And that is wrong.
This sounds very like a presidential candidate. You sound like a presidential candidate.
No, look, well, I am in training. I don't know if I'll make the Olympics though.
Oh no.
But agreed. But he's not the only one. Pete Buttigieg suggested he would assess a potential presidential campaign in 2028, telling a Substack author in a live interview here Tuesday that he would consider what I bring to the table. Buttigieg has already started dusting off his contact list to text small dollar donors and has been making headlines by doing right-wing podcasts and hosting in-person and online town halls and video chats. A group not affiliated with Buttigieg went as far to hand out, quote, all in for Pete bumper stickers to urge him to run. Cenk, are you excited about the prospect of either of these two guys running?
Okay, so Rahm Emanuel says, this income inequality and unfairness, et cetera, unacceptable. Well, that's funny because when you were Obama's chief of staff, you seemed to accept it.
Yep.
You didn't do anything about it. You didn't raise minimum wage. You didn't do paid family leave. You didn't even do public option. You didn't. So, I did Obamacare. Obamacare was Romney Care, written by Heritage Foundation, the same group that did Project 2025, et cetera. It was better than the past, but it was half a measure. And then they rested on their laurels for 7 years, did almost nothing else. So who are you talking to? He was a mayor of Chicago. He was a US congressman. He was an ambassador. He was the chief of staff for the president. Who are you talking about when you say that you haven't done enough? You haven't done enough. What you've done is unacceptable. You're the one who brought the Democratic Party to this situation in the first place. Rahm Emanuel is patient zero for what's wrong with the Democratic Party, even more so than Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, or Joe Biden. Why? Because Rahm Emanuel is the guy who said that we should never listen to progressives when we actually fought for economically populist bills that were very, very, very popular. He said, let's not do the popular bills. Why? Because he wanted to please the donor class. And do you know how many seats we lost under Obama when Rahm Emanuel was chief of staff? Nationwide, the Democrats lost 1,000 seats. Wow. 1,000. And this guy has the nerve to tell us how to run elections and how we should reform the Democratic Party so we could lose another 1,000 seats? And then we turn to Pete Buttigieg. Anytime anybody says that they're assessing, that means they're running, okay? And Buttigieg has been planning to run since the Super Tuesday of 2020, when Obama called him and said, bow your head, Biden's gonna be the candidate. He said, oh yeah, okay, do I get a cabinet post? Because I'm definitely gonna run in the next election. And so here we are. So please spare us with, I'm looking into it. Okay, so Buttigieg corporate 101. The whole thing with him is he's great at raising money. Who's he raising it from? Grassroots? No, largely corporate donors. And so, look, I'm not against everything Buttigieg does. I think him going on the right wing show is perfectly fine. Yeah. He went on Andrew Schultz's show. Andrew Schultz isn't even right wing, and the people taking his head off. Don't do that. I want everybody to have a fair shot. So of course Buttigieg is going to be in the primary. He'll make his case, and I hope we have an excellent economic populist that makes our case. But Buttigieg isn't going to change a single thing. One last quick thing on Buttigieg. and I almost don't want to give him this advice because he's good at adapting. He's a smart guy, I'll give him that, right? And that's why the elites love him. They're like, oh, did you know he's Harvard educated? He speaks 6 languages, he's so smart and elite. I know, but does it play well? Does it play well? So he said, oh, I'm in a district in Michigan where it's 50-50, and so I'm co-located with MAGA and Trump. I was like, you're what? Co-located. What the hell is that? What is that?
It's a term we use.
Who says co-located? Okay, look, brother, save that for Ramesh is a UCLA professor. You can say co-located.
We have that word in our academic papers.
Exactly, but don't run on it. Don't run on it. All right, Ramesh.
All right, so a couple things. Not only is there not coherence or consistency in the Democratic Party writ large, like I was just talking about, but here's the other thing. People don't trust them. People don't trust them because again and again and again, they tell you that they're gonna do this, that, or the other, someone like Rahm Emanuel or Pete Buttigieg or our former president, and then they don't do any of those things. And then you get shamed for being upset that those things weren't done, even though those things that we wanted, like paid family leave, are the only policies that reflect a positive vision for this country and hopefully the larger planet. And so it's either that they're terrible bargainers as politicians or they don't mean what they say. But both of those things suck compared to any alternative in the perception of the American public, including now what we found to be a far worse alternative in 2016 and much worse even now. I'll just say quickly about Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg's father, not that he should be his father's son, is one of the most famous translators of Antonio Gramsci. Pete Buttigieg wrote a wonderful essay in his high school, or maybe it was in college, talking about why Bernie Sanders is the real leader of America and American values. And then the last thing is I remember very well when I was working on the Sanders campaign, Pete's Wine Cave. He had this big wine cave fundraiser with the wealthiest of the wealthy, including tech oligarchs, and he was getting tons of money out of that. So he's someone who's trying to please everybody and therefore probably stands for nothing.
I'm with you, Cenk, that I think Pete's strategy of trying to win over young men, I'm with you on like pushing back against the criticism there. Like you go into those areas, you try to make the case, sure. I think he's a good messenger. He's been great on Fox. That said, I don't want him running for president. We saw in 2020 what a Pete Buttigieg presidency could look like. The things that he was running on, while he tried to find some room in between Biden and Bernie, it ultimately was a moderate and insufficient platform. Rahm Emanuel, I think, is hilarious. Him trying to do a populist shtick is absurd because if you look at his entire track record, like you said, of course, in Obama, but after his time as mayor, he took $12 million in consulting fees for Crestview Partners, a corporate lobbying and PR group. And the clients ranged from people in pharmaceuticals to private health insurance. And what did he do while he was consulting and working with these companies and with that firm? He would go on air and he would go on as a pundit and trash things like Medicare for all. While working with PG&E and coal companies, he would trash the Green New Deal. And then took hundreds of thousands in speaking fees from Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Duke Energy, the oil and gas industry, and the National Association of Realtors. This is according to reporting from Julia Rock and Andrew Perez a few years ago. He's taking money from the people that are creating all of this inequality, that are creating the economic strife affecting and afflicting these families that he's pretending to care about on The View. Nothing Rahm Emanuel says when it comes to this type of messaging should be taken seriously.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.